Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Benedictus Dominus. My name is Luke Meyerhoff, and today I have a very special guest. He's from the Diocese of Wichita. He went to school with me at Blessed Sacrament K through 8. I think you were
Yeah.
you were there all the way through from kindergarten, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then Cape and Mount Carmel, graduated in 2018. Currently, he's studying at Friends University in zoology, so that's pretty cool. This is Jacob Morss, guys.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jacob. Like Luke said, I went to Blessed Sacrament. Still am a parishioner there, although I kind of split time between that and St. Joseph's since I now live in Delano near Friends University. Um, yeah, I'm studying zoology and also history and political science. So
Oh, that's cool.
kind of going for 2 degrees right now, both kind of separate, but try to mix them together in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of just came on to talk about Catholic social thought and some political, but also Catholic religious organizations that the laity can get involved with to better participate socially and politically in what God calls us to do. Because with Luke and the clergy and people pursuing that, and even people pursuing religious life like sisters and nuns, they take promises and vows of poverty and service and all of this. But for the laity, we have to actually commit ourselves to doing these things in order to remain both socially aware and politically active in a way that is acting in what God calls us to be. And I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, and with Catholic social thought, it all centers around Christ's atonement and sacrifice, in my opinion. His atonement and his death on the cross is, I guess, what we call agape. It's a sacrificial love that is separate from the material loves that we know as humans. It's separate from like being sexually attracted to somebody or being really good friends with somebody or the love between family members, because it's an extra step of being sacrificial and something only God possess and share.
Yeah.
I read,
And it's more of a different love for somebody, especially if you don't have any necessity to help them either. If it's like somebody you don't know and you're showing good Catholic, you're obeying the social justice. There's a code or anything like that, but there's just kind of like a way that you go about things, especially with like stewardship and giving of your time, talent, and treasure to others.
yeah,
Just thought I'd add.
yeah. I mean, I've been reading many different theologians and authors, but one that I particularly like is Simone Weil, and she never converted to Catholicism, but she was definitely a learner from it and learner from priests in a region because she was French and she didn't live that long. She died at an early age, unfortunately, but she wrote a lot about theology and love. And she says that the most purest form of love is attention. And she kind of uses the example of the Good Samaritan that the love started when the Good Samaritan gave that person on the road attention, whereas everybody else ignored him and acted like he was invisible. So that is kind of a good idea to touch on, that it all starts with recognizing the people that need help so you can actually help them.
Right. And even if it's not necessary, even if it's not giving them an extreme amount of love or attention, even if it's just, would it even count as, pulling out of your pocket a card to Catholic Charities, like, here, call these people, they can really help you. Because I don't have time or the resources to help you in the way that I wish I could.
Yeah, and she says attention or love is like faith because it's recognizing what is invisible and acting upon that and doing something even though there isn't evidential or practical reason to do it. It's going out of your way to do something that you don't really have backing for, but that you believe in.
Mm-hmm. So, Jacob, you said in your our document that talked about what we were going to talk about on the show, and you said that Catholic social teaching focuses on three main tenets.
Yes.
Can you maybe explain what those are in simple terms?
Yeah.
Because
I think the core basis is subsidiarity and solidarity. And you need those two before you can do anything else, because they work together, essentially. The church calls us with subsidiarity to not be dependent on larger institutions all the time, because when you become dependent, you lose your freedom and you lose your ability to do what you need to do. Other Christian thinkers like Rousseau have talked about this. Rousseau often talked about it, but with the church, I think Pope Leo the 13th says in Rerum Novarum that man must reap the fruit of his own labors and that type of thing. So that's the essential idea, is that the goal to create strong Catholic or Christian communities is to create ones that are independent of a larger government or a larger economic system that doesn't have our Catholic and Christian morals in mind, so that we can create communities that are self-sufficient and working to help everybody in this society, from the lowest to the highest socioeconomic classes. And you need solidarity to do that, because obviously there are poor people and oppressed people who lack the social capital to do it for themselves, which is why those of us in a better standing and a better socioeconomic class are called to help those people with solidarity. And then the other tenet I think Catholic social teaching really focuses on is the preferential option for the poor. This is an idea that is talked about in many different circles, even on some of the radical circles. If you're like a liberation theologist, that's the basis of what you believe in. And I sympathize with that a lot. I mean, I'm not going to hide it. I definitely have some radical political views, but just, I mean, look at my shirt. It's like a Catholic anarchist shirt, but yeah.
I don't mean to interject or interrupt your point, but I remember right after I introduced you that, oh yeah, we worked on Paladin Staff for a year before I dipped out. And boy, those were some fun times, you know. I was a sports editor for the school newspaper at Capon, and Jacob was the news editor. And there was so much stuff going on. It was just back and forth. It was kind of funny.
Yeah, those were fun. But yeah, I mean, I pretty much used that to write about issues I thought that mattered. But yeah, the preferential option of the poor, it mainly calls us to always side with the people who are the most oppressed or the most poor in the situation, because they lack that social capital or ability to protect themselves. So even like in wars and stuff, we might not be involved in the war, but we are called to protect those who are suffering from the war and don't have the ability to protect themselves. And it doesn't necessarily require a direct involvement, but we should be advocating for those who need help and need the resources to protect themselves.
Of course. You have a great quote here by St. Oscar Romero. I think you should definitely hit on this point.
Yeah. I mean, Oscar Romero was an amazing figure in the Latin American church for what he did during the war in El Salvador to protect people. I think he's somebody to look up to, because he started out as this priest who people doubted because he didn't really get involved. He kind of just stayed in his lane and did did his basic duties. But then once he became archbishop, he became really involved in the struggle and protecting the people who were being killed every day or forced to disappear and that type of thing. But he says, when talking in reference to Jesus Christ, that he was a liberator who came to sought to end exploitation of man by man in the world. And we are kind of called to continue Christ's goal in the material world, because yes, our goal is to be in union with God's love in heaven, but it starts here on what we do on this material world that we're placed on. This quote really, it talks about slavery, or this term slavery that Romero uses, and I really like it because he defines slavery as more than just what we think of as like being forced to work without pay and that type of thing. But he also says that slavery is being illiterate and being uneducated and being all these other things that prevent you from being able to progress in life and to protect yourself from those who have these things that you don't have. So he says that the goal should be not only to prevent people from being exploited, but also to help teach people and help give people the material resources they need so they can survive on their own, getting back to those ideas of solidarity and subsidiarity.
Yeah.
And I think,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, as we kind of move on here, something I've learned from the theology I've read on these ideas is that orthopraxis is just as important as orthodoxy. And by that, I mean, yes, it's great and it's important that we know the faith and that we know the tenets of the church and all these things, but it's just as important that we act upon these things, which is what orthopraxis is. Orthodoxy, yeah, the theory that we learn and stuff, and praxis is what we do knowing that theory and knowing these ideas of the faith.
Okay. So it's more of hearing what we are taught and putting it into practice wherever we are, and however that looks. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of being, I think that's what separates us Catholics from many other Christian sects. Not to say that they don't do this, but in Catholicism, we say that both having faith and good works is necessary for salvation, because of the faith should inspire us to do good works. And the faith is really the orthodoxy here of what we learn and know about God. And then the good works is the orthopraxis of how we act upon what we know now about God and love and Jesus and what his message was to us.
Absolutely. So Jacob, so after you've explained kind of what this orthodoxy versus orthopraxis is, I'm going to turn the question on. What have you been moving towards acting upon what we've been taught? Because I remember in high school, you mentioned Rerum Revarum by Pope Leo XIII, and I remember Mr. James Lewis, our teacher for Catholic social teaching, he was teaching us how to remember what Rerum Novarum was, and he'd like get his manual shifter out and he'd go Rerum Novarum,
Yeah.
How have you kind of lived out what we've learned since high school, or maybe before that?
Well, when I was in that class with Mr. Lewis, we did a project on that class on one of the encyclicals of the popes, and he really pushed on me to do Rerum Novarum. I was looking at some other. I think I was looking at one of the ones by JP2, and there was another one I think by Pius the 15th or something. But yeah, he really pushed it. I do Rerum Novarum, so I ended up doing that one. And I enjoyed doing it because it really is where the basis of our social thought begins, introducing these ideas that we talked about earlier with subsidiarity and solidarity. But yeah, since then, in high school, I would say I wasn't super connected with the church and my faith as much as I am now. I think leaving maybe the Catholic school environment and now being forced to choose to remain Catholic or go my own direction has reaffirmed myself in the faith. Especially, I go to Friends, which is a Christian school, but not Catholic like Newman.
Right.
And so, yeah, coming across people of other Christian faiths, but not Catholicism, has kind of reaffirmed my own beliefs and what Catholicism teaches and that type of thing. But since leaving Capon, I've also read more from these Catholic activists and Catholic figures, Oscar Romero being a main one. I've read many of his homilies. I have a little book that has like his homilies written in them, and they're very interesting to read. I've also read some, Thomas Merton. I don't know if you know him, but he's also good, and some other liberation theologists. But mainly what I've focused on reading is the writings of Dorothy Day and the Catholic Worker Movement. They're a movement that was started by Dorothy Day and Peter Marin here in the United States that focused on a movement for the laity, essentially. And it started out as a newspaper, and the newspaper is still running today. If you want, you can send a letter to the New York Catholic Worker and subscribe to it. But the newspaper kind of focused on social issues and giving a Catholic view on all these political issues in our country and in the world in general. But then it moved on to a movement of charitable works and that type of thing. They focused on having hospitality houses on one side, so houses for the homeless to help feed them and help the people in the urban areas. And the other side, this is mostly Peter Marin's work because he was fascinated with it, were these communitarian farms that would help people in the rural parts of the country, like those who didn't live in the city, so can't really go to homeless shelters and that type of thing. And it brought the charity out to those people who live in the more rural areas by teaching them how they can survive on their own. I think he called them like agronomic university because his goal was to reteach people these basic skills that we have forgotten as we've entered modern society and stuff where it's no longer as necessary. He wanted to teach people how to farm again and how to build stuff again and these basic skills so that they could become independent of the larger institutions, getting back to this idea of subsidiarity, so they could live on their own and not be so reliant on the larger economic system or the government to help them and all these things. And I think these are ideas I kind of learned from Mr. Lewis because he practices them on his own with his farm and that type of thing. But yeah, recently I took action this past summer and went to visit one of these Catholic worker farms just to experience what it is they're doing and just exactly what it's like. I chose to do a Catholic worker farm over a hospitality house because, I mean, we've been to homeless shelter. I mean, I at least have. I think we did at some point. We had a field trip there or something. But we've been to homeless shelters and helped that. So I kind of knew what that was. And I really wanted to experience what they're actually doing on these farms that's different. And so, I visited the White Rose Catholic Worker Farm in Missouri. It's in the northern Missouri, kind of definitely a rural part of Missouri. During this summer, a friend of mine. And when we got there, it was different than what I was expecting, but it kind of was also how I thought things would be. They live on this large land trust with many other families, and all these families, going back to the idea of solidarity, kind of work together to help each other when is needed. Like the first day we got there, we went over to the neighbor's house because they were moving, and so we went over to help them move furniture and stuff. And that just seems regular thing you would do, but it becomes more apparent when you're going out of your way to do it, I guess. When like my friend asked me, is this what you expected? And I'm like, yeah, kinda. I mean, I knew it would just be basically helping people with their basic needs. Like it wasn't going to be something grand or big. It was just going out of our way to live in a way where we're helping others and putting others first for that week that we were there. But other than that, throughout the week, it was both challenging and enriching, I feel like, because with these communitarian farms, many of them are very primitivist, I guess I would say. They don't have electricity. They don't have running water. Yeah, and no electricity or running water. Everything we ate was grown there. And so there was one night one of the neighbors went to the nearest town and got some beef because another neighbor had this new pizza oven that they had made. And so we had pizza on the last night, which was fun. But every other meal was mostly vegetarian based, which me personally am not a vegetarian. That was something I had to get used to, having that as every meal. Because we definitely were working hard, and we definitely had burned more calories than we consumed, because the people who live there are used to that diet, so they become accustomed to it. But for me and him, who were vegetarians, we were like, yeah, I don't know how we're getting enough calories to make up for all this that we're burning working through the day. And
you survived.
Yeah, we did. The no electricity was not too bad. I mean, it was the middle of summer in Missouri, so it was definitely hot. I would say the one thing I miss the most of luxuries was ice, because you don't really think about it, but when it's hot and you're working all day and you get water and it's just lukewarm because there's no ice to cool it down, that's when you really start to notice, oh, I do kind of miss having some of these modern luxuries. But aside from the challenges of it, it definitely was enriching to, I mean, I turned my phone off pretty much the whole time. And that was the only electric device, I think, on the property. And so when you're pulled away from these modern devices and luxuries that we have, and really just the busyness of living in modern society, it allows you to refocus on what matters and your faith and that type of thing, especially when you're surrounded by nature, essentially, because they lived on a farm, but their farm was right next to this little, like, it's not a forest, but it's a little wooded area with a pond and everything. And often when we had, we would just go walk through there or go jump in the pond to cool off. And so, and I think that's what Peter Marin saw when he promoted some of these communitarian farm ideas, is that often prayer is probably the one way we connect with God the most, but prayer can be found in many different forms. We always heard in Catholic school when going to Mass that, like, singing is praying times 2 or something when we're singing at Mass. Well, for Marin and for these, it seems like they found their form of prayer in the labor that they do.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working the land and growing all this stuff by hand, you are literally reaping the fruits of your labor, going back to what
Mm-hmm.
Pope Leo 13th said in Rerum Novarum. And it's getting rid of all these middlemen, I guess, and things dividing you from just uh, reaping those fruits of the labor and
Mm-hmm.
in all yourself, while also helping others who can't do it for themselves. Because in this
Right.
community, I think the people I was staying with had been living there for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they were still in progress. I mean, they want to fully become sustainable, and like they didn't have a well, but I think a well was something in the process. We were just kind of relying on rainwater. Um,
Uh-huh.
but
Yeah.
they lived in a community that had a lot of Amish folk and Amish people in it. And I really think not only were they helping their neighbors, being good Catholic stewards, but they were reliant on their Amish neighbors and their Amish folk to help teach them some of these sustainable ways of living, because they
Mm-hmm.
originally like living in Chicago and the city, and so they
Right.
had to learn themselves how to live this way. And their Amish neighbors really helped them.
Mm-hmm. It's really
But
cool.
yeah, I mean, this way that they're living, and the thing that they're really promoting is this idea of voluntary poverty. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really what the Catholic worker touches on. Um, when we're talking about solidarity, Dorothy Day always said that solidarity was living with the poor, for the poor, and as the poor. I
Mm-hmm.
think that. Um, and she said we did this through voluntary poverty, which is, I want to make clear, is different than destitution.
Uh-huh.
Destitution is when you are so poor that you don't have the money and resources to survive, essentially. So that's who we're seeking the help. Voluntary
Right.
poverty, doing what Jesus called on that prince in the Bible to do, to give up his things, uh,
Mm-hmm.
all his material possessions, and that's what it asks us to do. It's an extreme form of living. Obviously, there's nothing really inherently wrong with having some of the luxuries we have. Um,
Right.
I don't think it necessarily calls us to get rid of everything, but it calls us to live in a way to where that's not our goal. Our goal isn't to maximize how many nice things we have. It's asking us
Yeah.
to make full and helping those who don't have those nice things. And as I kind of talked here in the paper, there's four really basic ideas to voluntary poverty.
Mm-hmm.
The first being economic equality, going back to what Oscar Romero said, that we hope to liberate the world from these
Mm-hmm.
forms of slavery as Christ intended. Then it
Uh-huh.
goes to solidarity, as we've talked about already,
Yep.
living for the poor, as the poor, and with the poor. And sustainable living, too, which I think is important, especially as Catholics living in this era, because with Pope Francis leading the church, I think he's really done a great job at focusing on some of these social issues that have often been overlooked for the past uh, decades and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which is, we're living in a time that's environmentally kind of questionable with what the future holds with climate change and all this. Pope
Right.
Francis is on this in his encyclical Laudato Si.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed that encyclical because, yes, the focus is being environmentally friendly and being stewards as the earth as God called us to do in Genesis with
Yeah.
Adam. Um, but he connects it with these other Catholic teachings of being or of having solidarity with the poor, because I think in that let me look at this real quick because I want to get the quote right. But in that, he has a quote or a statement where he says that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate, yes, questions of justice and debates on the environment, so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Everything is connected. Concern for the environment thus needs to be joined in sincere love for fellow human beings and an unwavering commitment to resolving the problems of societies. And I really like that quote where he says, it's about connecting the cry of the earth with the cry of the poor. Because when the earth suffers, the first people to suffer on the earth are the poor who lack the ability to protect themselves from natural disasters, droughts, and famines, all these things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a huge part of living in this voluntary poverty state, because not only are you doing a better job of being a steward of the earth, but you're also helping those who need the most help in society. And the final kind of is this idea of personal freedom. And it just goes back to that idea of subsidiarity, where if you are growing your own food, making your own furniture, and being independent of these larger systems, you are more free to worship the Lord and how you choose and that type of thing.
Right. It could even be said that the more deep or independent you are, you could be, even if it's not necessarily you're growing your own food, because I don't really have the space in my backyard or to grow my own food right now. It's just kind of being able to do as much as you can on your own. Like I'll change my own oil in my car, and just kind of be more, in that way. Does that kind of connect in a way?
Yeah, like I said, this is the extreme way of living. Not everybody has the ability to just go out into the country and start living on a farm or something. I mean, land is expensive, but you can do this in small ways, as you said, of doing your own oil on your car, like you said, or like when it comes to educating, although that's something that you need school for, you can also go out of your way to educate yourself. Ever since high school, I've always had at least one book at a time where I've been reading that was an educational book. Because from what I'm learning in school must also kind of be coupled with what I learn independently of school on my own. Because really, yeah, college will end in a couple years or whatever, but education kind of continues forever as you read more and do more. And that's another thing. If you have the abilities to get access to books and get access to knowledge, as we all do since we live in this modern society with the internet, it's a kind of a duty on us to continue to learn more, and especially in connection with Catholic social teaching, to kind of be politically aware and active of what's going on in the world and recognize how blessed we are, and also what that means for us to do to help those who are not as blessed and is not as successful or rich or have these material possessions and social capital that we have.
Absolutely. So basically just live well with whatever you have, and live full. The stewardship theme a few years ago was, or maybe it was last year, was living fully alive as missionary disciples. Yes. There's that missionary aspect of living, this side, or being evangelizing, but there's also the fully alive part could also mean more on this point too, of, living to your fullest potential with the things that God has given us and being good sharers and stewards of those gifts, and I think living it out in that way.
I think we in the Wichita Diocese do actually a really good job at it. With
Mm-hmm.
we have multiple Lord's diners in the city, which are
Mm-hmm.
that are usually always open and running at some point in the day, and also
Mm-hmm.
bring food to people. But back to education, the stewardship model we have of schools here um, really hits on those core ideas of Catholic social teaching, because it's all of us parishioners coming together in solidarity to
Mm-hmm.
say part of our tithing will go to paying for our children's educations, thus
Mm-hmm.
making us more independent in a way, in an independent community.
Mm-hmm.
And since we are independent of the public school system, which isn't good or bad really, it's just how it is,
Mm-hmm.
that allows us to teach and learn in a Catholic based way. Since
Mm-hmm.
we've become independent of the larger institution, we have now more freedom to learn and teach things from a Catholic perspective in our Catholic schools that many people now have access to, and it's not just the richest or the most well-off people who have access to that.
Right. I kind of have an idea just kind of floating around in my head that just kind of came up is maybe a great way to start off with kind of looking at how to live this, more full Christian social thought is to start in your parish. There's always like you look at the bulletin, there's a bunch of stuff in there that there's things you can volunteer for. They always need help. You know, there's things you can give. You can, help financially support the parish or give of your time, and helping. Um, you know, I'll just go back here. I have an example. I was teaching Toast Tuesday this summer, and I was at a parish. It was really cool. I was walking around in the school on a Sunday afternoon, and there's a parishioner in there fixing doors in the
Yeah.
school because they needed to be fixed, and it would be way too expensive to go out and just buy a new door. So their parishioners are giving of their time and resources and simply fixing it themselves on a Sunday, even though it's a Sunday. I think that was still really cool to see, kind of living
Yeah.
that out in a true
Yeah,
way.
it's all kind of about these small things,
Hmm.
and to maybe one day get to the sustainable lifestyle and that type of thing. Like you think of everything starts small, because the Catholic worker movement, as I said, it's originally just started as like a penny newspaper in New York
Hmm.
by these two Catholic figures, but it eventually expanded into a whole movement that is not only nationwide but now worldwide in many ways.
Hmm.
So it all kind of just starts with one little small act to go out of your own comfort zone and do something for someone else.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. I really like this topic, and I would love to keep talking about this more, but we need to wrap it up here shortly.
Yeah.
Do you have any good resources or books off the top of your head that would be good for somebody who maybe is inspired by this and wants to go read up a little bit on it?
Yeah. Rerum Novarum, all obviously, is if you're
Hmm.
looking at encyclicals, I would recommend either Rerum Novarum or Laudato Si.
Or
Um,
both.
yeah, or both. Yeah, both of them really do a good job at hitting on some of these ideas.
Hmm.
As for books, I would probably recommend Loaves and Fishes is by Dorothy Day, and that kind of details what the Catholic worker movement is and what it does.
Hmm.
Uh, I would also recommend, I think it's called The Scandal of Redemption. It's a little book um, that has collections of Oscar Romero's homilies, and
Okay.
it's and some of his like diary entries and stuff, and it's really good. Aside from that, there's The Long Loneliness, which is Dorothy Day's autobiography. If you were just
Hmm.
looking at a figure who did live this way. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, I mean, there's plenty of others. Simone Weil is also a good author if you want to read her. I think the last book I read of her was called Love in the Void. And it's
Mhm.
it's less focused on these things and more on a different perspective on theology, and how we
Mhm.
think of these ideas of love. But it's also really good at, and it definitely gives a different perspective because she herself wasn't a full blown Catholic like some of these people. She had relations with the church, but never really converted before she died at an early age. So she definitely gives a unique perspective from um, just the mainline theology that we all learn and stuff.
Awesome. Well, that was awesome, Jacob. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yep. Thank.
I hope to have you on sometime again. I think it'd be really cool if we can, dive maybe in the future, look at some real life, maybe more political or like Catholic things that are changing and look at them through this perspective. I think it would be really interested to have maybe
Yeah.
a direct focus and topic to focus on because I feel like we could go on for hours about that. It'd be really cool. So, well, you have anything else, Jacob?
No, I think I got it all out there.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys for watching. Thanks, Jacob, for coming on. We hope to
Problem.
see you soon. If you like the video, subscribe, comment, share it with your friends. We're trying to get the word out a little bit more about our videos so we can reach more people with some good content. Um, hit the notification bell, and go ahead in the comments below, and um, I'll have a question down there for you guys to answer, just to see if you guys have. I'll have a good question. Don't worry. Until next time, God bless you. We'll see you soon. Benedictusdominustalk, Deo gratias.